Hi, welcome back to the new Chattanooga Podcast. My name is Marie Mott, native and the people's candidate for mayor. Today, I want to talk about an idea that was brought to the forefront in 2021 by Monty Bruell, who ran for mayor against Tim Kelly. He talked about free transit and how we needed to move the population around to better access jobs and look for jobs. Now, we have made the first Fridays of the month free, but we have to go all in and ensure that everyone in the city, even visitors, can access free, rapid, and accessible public transit. So for people out there, you might not know that the bus was actually my first way of getting around Chattanooga as an 18-year-old. Sunday, I turned 36, so that was quite a while ago. But the bus was a very critical component to me accessing my first job at JCPenney's at Hamilton Place Mall. I would wake up in the morning and get myself together, and I would walk from Blackford Street in Churchville all the way to Bailey Avenue. Now, for people who might not know the distance from my home to the bus stop, that's a solid mile. And you might say, well, that doesn't seem that long. I want you to imagine walking a solid mile in 97-degree weather with humidity. Or in the rain, and having cars that are speeding down Bailey Avenue, splashing water on you. What about in the wind and the frigid cold? And now I'm a blessed somebody because I don't have a disability that would make it even more difficult to get around. So imagine the community member that's in a wheelchair that has to go a mile just to get to the bus stop. What about the elder, the woman with small children? We often don't think about accessibility, let alone the conditions that people often have to travel in just to be able to get to a bus stop. And when we get to the bus stop, it would be no covering, so you would be out in the open, fully exposed, in all types of weather. And that wasn't even the worst part. I would have to get to the bus stop 2 hours early if I wanted to make it to work on time. And because we have not really innovated CARTA and considered some options to increase efficiency in our city, one of the other difficulties is how late the bus would come. It was pretty infrequent, and it would be so frustrating just getting on the bus to get to work. Then there's the whole idea that for a bus pass, you're going to spend quite a bit of money just to be able to ride the bus. And now imagine if that person is in poverty. Just to be able to get to a job or even look for one, it's going to hit your pockets. And so it wasn't only my own experience. Riding the bus opened my eyes to being able to see the battles that my neighbors were going through as well, just to continue to climb that ladder towards the American dream. That's why it was pretty important when Monty Bruell, who challenged Mayor Kelly in 2021, came up with the idea during his campaign for free public transit. Now, I would not be authentic if I didn't say that I was highly skeptical and a little challenging to Monty. I'm sorry, Monty. Originally, because I couldn't conceive that public transportation could ever be free. And it's not my fault. We've never seen it. With the exception of the small shuttles downtown often utilized by tourists. So when Monty started talking about free transit and began to explain methods to be able to pay for it, as well as how to make it more efficient and how that ties into an economic strategy, kind of like what we talked about for childcare. When we talk about jobs, we can't leave the conversation at just creating jobs or with wages or with benefits. We have to talk about how are people going to access those jobs? How are people going to have childcare so that people who have children are going to be able to go to work? And how do we create seats in the city of Chattanooga to make childcare access, especially for low-income children, accessible in the city as well, so that people can continue to have some upward mobility? So this is not something that is separate from economic strategy. It is a critical component to ensuring that people have the ability to be able to get around, as well as get out of their neighborhood beyond just work to access parts of the city that otherwise they might be segregated from simply because they might not have a vehicle. This will also alleviate the amount of vehicles that are on the road and clear up some of the traffic if more people would take the bus. So there's also a benefit not only to the environment, but also in traffic times if more and more people would use the bus instead of getting around the city in their vehicle. So in order to bring this idea to life, I wouldn't be myself if I didn't do my due diligence. And again, it's always my desire to break these issues down to the most minute level so that you can understand how we make these things possible. And that you can do some of the research on your own to be able to see that other cities are progressing forward. And why not Chattanooga? The first city I want to look at is Alexandria, Virginia. Now, they decided to unveil a revamped bus network in September of 2021 due to meticulous planning by the city, Dash, and WMATA. The redesign was part of a 10-year plan prioritizing high ridership services, streamlining routes for faster and more efficient travel, the commitment to free fares, especially during weekends, and showcasing a visionary choice to prioritize accessibility over short-term gains. So I like that last line right there, because when we think about this incremental approach that Chattanooga takes around issues, it's pretty much the short term. We have to be bold in how we are working to ensure more people are being put back to work, and that we're moving some of the systemic barriers for people, whether that's cost or access, as well as that we are continuing to innovate public transit to make it efficient and faster. So the journey began in 2018 with a draft plan in 2019, emphasizing a shift towards high ridership services. Despite some concerns, so of course there's always going to be some skepticism, and that's why I wanted to say I was a critic and a skeptic at first, because I just didn't understand. And the more conversations that I had with Monty one-on-one, and the more that I saw him explain how other cities were making free public transit work and how we could pay for it, it was an idea that was so much easier to embrace, and how I could see that that's part of the economic strategy to be able to have upward mobility in our neighborhoods. So the final project simplified the network, leading to faster trips for more residents. The pandemic unexpectedly thrust free fares into the limelight, prompting the city to endorse a $1.5 million annual investment in zero fares. Alexandria's transit evolution illustrates that strategic planning and a commitment to accessibility can reshape a city's future. And again, this is part of a 10-year plan. The second case study that I want to take a look at on this episode is Kansas City, Missouri. So Kansas City made headlines in 2019 by becoming the first major city in the U.S. to offer citywide free public transportation. 2.5 years later, the impact is undeniable. Survey data from the Urban League of Greater Kansas City reveals a resounding success in advancing transit equity. Nearly 90% of riders increased bus usage, reported improved access to essentials like food and healthcare. For many, this policy facilitated job access and boosted the sense of inclusion in the community. Beyond personal benefits, the initiative has environmental advantages, potentially eliminating thousands of tons of carbon dioxide emissions annually. However, the journey to sustained success is ongoing. Kansas City faces the challenge of securing funding beyond federal relief, and a critical consideration for Chattanooga as we contemplate the path to a fare-free future. Now, CARTA has made the first Fridays of every month free. That underscores a commitment to accessibility, but we can't stop there. Why do we need free transit for Chattanooga? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Number one, we need economic inclusion. So free transit dismantles financial barriers, opening up job opportunities and fostering economic growth for all. So we know that 37406, 37407, and 37410 are three of the most impoverished zip codes in the country. We need to break down those barriers to ensure that some of the poorest people, especially women and children in our community, are able to utilize free public transit for job opportunities and to access other resources. One of the things I learned working with young people in the community was simplistically because of not having a vehicle or a lack of public transportation access and efficient routes. There are a lot of young people who have never even left their neighborhoods to come downtown to see the Tennessee River. And you might laugh and think, how is that possible? Well, if you are living below or right at the poverty line, you don't have the ability to be able to access public transit like more privileged individuals. The second reason why we need to move to free transit is enhanced quality of life. Similar to Kansas City, free transit improves access to essential services, education, and leisure activities, elevating the overall quality of life for residents. We also need free transit for number 3, and that's safety and community well-being. A free fare system can enhance public transportation security, fostering community well-being, as seen in the decrease in incidents in Kansas City. So Monty was ahead of his time. And it's like that sometimes. But it's so important that we keep his idea and advocacy alive in this next campaign and really push these economic strategies not as one-offs, but as interconnected points to be able to get people to more prosperous and healthy lives. The other reality is Chattanooga is so segregated, whether we're talking about race or whether we're talking about class. One of the only ways that we'll better understand and have an appreciation for one another's culture as well as one another's history is we have to get in more spaces where we can meet one another, talk to one another, and participate in activities that might not necessarily be something that's tied into my own culture. And so think about what it's like to have children of all backgrounds and economic statuses being able to paddleboard on the riverfront, and they got there because of free transit. Imagine them being able to hike and see one another, and they got there because of free transit. Imagine the adults who go downtown, because a question that I get from African Americans who visit Chattanooga is when they come into the downtown space, I get calls often from my beloved individuals, and they're like, Marie, where are all the Black people? We need some diversity in our public spaces. And that will also begin to melt away the assumptions that we have about one another, because we'll begin to talk. And maybe the conversations that we'll start either on the bus or after we get off will allow us to have more compassion for one another and more care for all individuals in our community, regardless of our age, our gender, our zip code, our educational attainment level, and our ethnicity. So let's push beyond the bare minimum. We can't continue to do what's easy in Chattanooga. It's time for us to do some hard things. We can do hard things. And planning is kind of hard. A 10-year plan, that's not easy. But imagine how many voices we could bring into rooms when we think about how we're going to build a strategy to increase ridership and efficiency and access for all citizens. We have to see that free and accessible public transportation is transformative and a point of power for those historically left behind. It's time to contribute to Chattanooga's progress. My name is Marie Mott, and I just want to thank you once again for tuning in. And I hope that you will dig a little deeper into how we can ensure free transit in the city of Chattanooga. If you want to connect with me and send me a question, info@marieforcha.com, as well as Marie for Cha on all social media platforms. I love you all, family, and guess what? It's nothing you can do about it.